My name is Olivia Harper. I'm 32 years old, and the moment my parents told me to sell my land to save my brother, I knew every cruel little joke they had made about my life had finally come due. We were standing in my farmhouse kitchen while rain tapped against the window panes, and my mother cried like I was the one breaking the family apart. My father stood stiff near the table with papers in his hand. My brother looked wrecked but not humbled, and his wife still had the nerve to look at my home like it was something she had to survive for an hour. Then my brother laughed once, bitter and sharp, and said, "Come on, Olivia. Don't act like this is complicated. You married a lowly farmer, not a king. Sell the land, clear the debt, and for once do something useful for this family." My face burned, but not from shame this time. From memory. From hearing his voice again in my head on my wedding day. Mocking the man I loved while everyone smiled into champagne glasses and pretended humiliation was humor. My husband stood beside me, calm as winter soil, one hand resting on the back of my chair as if he already knew this storm had been coming for years. My father slid the paperwork across the table. My mother whispered that blood should matter more than pride. My brother's wife said real adults fix real financial disasters. And then my husband looked at the papers, looked at all of them, and gave the smallest, strangest smile I had ever seen. It wasn't kind. It wasn't nervous. It was the smile of a man who had finally decided to stop letting fools speak first. Before I tell you what he said and what happened after I refused to break my own life to repair theirs, tell me, what time is it for you right now, and where are you watching from? I'm curious to see how far this story will travel. 3 years earlier, if you had asked my family what they thought of my marriage, they would have called it a waist wrapped in lace. I met Ryan Stone when I was still living in Chicago, working 60-hour weeks in environmental consulting and pretending burnout was ambition. He was the opposite of everything my family respected. He was quiet, sun-browned, and steady. He owned work boots with actual mud on them, not fashionable versions of hardship purchased in expensive stores. He listened more than he spoke. He didn't brag. He didn't posture. He didn't need an audience to feel important. He ran a farm outside Galena, Illinois, and when he talked about soil health, rainfall patterns, and crop rotation, he sounded more grounded than anyone I had ever met in a downtown boardroom. My family heard the word farmer and translated it into failure. My brother Marcus was 34, loud, polished, and permanently impressed with himself. He worked in private wealth management in Chicago and married Sophia Lane, a hedge fund strategist who had built a reputation for calling trends before the market moved. Between the two of them, they carried themselves like the economy personally consulted them before making decisions. My parents, Donald and Elaine, adored that image. They loved tailored confidence, expensive restraint, and the illusion that money was proof of character. Ryan threatened all of that simply by being genuine. At our wedding, held in a restored barn on Ryan's side of the state because I wanted one place in my life that did not feel curated for performance, Marcus made sure the reception became a showcase for contempt. He clinked his glass, smiled like a man about to offer affection, and said, "I just want to congratulate my big sister for following her heart. Some women marry a future. Olivia married a farmer." The room laughed the way people laugh when they want to stay aligned with power. Then Sophia leaned into the microphone, all satin elegance and dead-eyed sweetness, and added, "And honestly, it's kind of refreshing. Not everyone is built for complexity. Some people are happiest with fresh eggs, open skies, and simpler dreams." My mother laughed into her napkin. My father looked down at his plate like he disapproved of the wording, but agreed with the message. I remember gripping the stem of my glass so hard I thought it might snap. Ryan's hand closed around mine beneath the table, warm and unshaking. He didn't rise to the bait. He never did. I stood, raised my water glass, and said, "To marriage. May it teach us who values love, who values status, and who confuses the two." The room went quiet for a second, but the damage had already been done. That was the night my family made my husband into a symbol, not a person, not a man. A symbol of everything they believed I had settled for. It didn't end there. The following Thanksgiving in Winnetka, Marcus gave Ryan a bottle of hand lotion in front of everyone and said, "For the cracked hands, occupational hazard, right?" Sophia asked whether farm bookkeeping counted as real finance or creative counting. At Christmas, my father asked me if I ever regretted leaving serious work for a rustic lifestyle. At Easter, my mother told a family friend, in front of me, that I had always been emotionally driven and that some daughters were simply not cut out for strategic lives. It was death by 1,000 polished cuts. They never screamed. They never needed to. Their cruelty came in tidy packages with good manners and expensive wine. The worst part was that for a while, it worked. I started second-guessing everything. I had left a respected career. I had chosen a life outside the city. I loved my work with Ryan, the markets, the restoration projects, the educational workshops we ran for local schools. But love is harder to defend when the people who raised you treat it like evidence of collapse. Only my younger sister Nora ever looked ashamed during those gatherings. She was 27, a pediatric nurse in Evanston, and unlike the rest of them, she still had a conscience that made her uncomfortable when people bled in front of her. One night, after another brutal family dinner, she walked me to my car and said softly, "They keep doing this because they think you'll always absorb it." I looked back at the glowing windows of my parents' house and asked, "And what happens when I stop?" Nora didn't answer. She didn't have to. Sometimes silence is just fear wearing a human face. The first crack in Marcus and Sophia's perfect financial empire appeared the way rot often does, hidden beneath polish, announced only by smell if you were paying close enough attention. That spring, the bragging changed shape. Marcus still talked loudly about portfolio performance and exclusive client dinners, but the stories were too rehearsed, too bright, too eager. Sophia, who used to glide through every room like she was privately grading everyone's life choices, started checking her phone under the dinner table and excusing herself to take calls. She returned from the backyard with a frozen smile. At a family birthday dinner for my mother, I caught one fragment I don't think they meant me to hear. Sophia was whispering to Marcus in the hallway and said, "If Stoneacre hits the next licensing round, we are exposed far beyond what we modeled." I only caught it because Ryan had once mentioned the name Stoneacre in passing when speaking with someone from a university research partnership. He didn't elaborate, and I didn't push. Ryan had always been strangely private about the technical side of the farm. He'd spend hours in the machine shed, then come back in with grease on his hands, and that thoughtful, inward look he got when something important was assembling in his mind. That night in the hallway, Marcus let out a short, contemptuous laugh and said, "It's an overhyped ag tech vanity play from the Midwest. They're selling optimism to climate-anxious investors. When it drops, we make everything back." I felt something cold move through me. Not comprehension yet, just the sense that I had bumped into a door I wasn't supposed to notice. A week later, Nora called me from the hospital parking garage on her break. She sounded tired and guilty. "I probably shouldn't tell you this," she said, "but Mom and Dad moved a lot of their retirement money into a structured thing Marcus recommended, and Sophia's firm tied themselves to a short position they keep calling temporary. Everyone is acting like it's under control, which in this family usually means it's on fire." I leaned against the kitchen counter and watched Ryan through the window checking drip lines near the western field. "Are they in trouble?" I asked. Nora exhaled. "I think they're already past trouble and heading toward disaster." I should tell you I didn't feel noble hearing that. I wish I had. I wish I could say my first emotion was concern. But that would be a lie. And lies are how families like mine survive. What I felt first was a dark, private flicker of satisfaction. After years of being treated like the family cautionary tale, I was hearing panic in the house that had always reserved panic for other people. Then shame followed quickly behind it, because no matter how cruel they had been, there was still a part of me wired to grieve their pain. That contradiction exhausted me. How do you bury loyalty when it was planted in you before language? How do you stop wanting fairness from people who only understand hierarchy? I brought it up to Ryan that night while we were washing dirt from radishes in the sink. "Do you know anything about a company called Stoneacre?" I asked as casually as I could. He paused for half a second. Only half a second. But when you love someone, you learn the weight of their silences. "Why?" he asked. Marcus mentioned it in that superior, stupid way he mentions anything he thinks he can beat. Ryan dried his hands slowly. People like your brother make the same mistake over and over, he said. They think if something looks plain, it must be small. If someone stays quiet, they must be powerless. If work happens far from a skyline, it must not matter. I watched him, sensing a shape in the dark but not yet knowing its name. That wasn't an answer. He gave me a faint smile. No, it was a warning. The summer got hotter, and so did the tension. My mother called more often, but never to ask about me. She asked vague questions about land values in Joe Davies County, insurance on agricultural property, whether we had considered diversification. My father stopped making jokes and started making assessments. He said over the phone one Sunday, "Good land is only useful if you know when to let it go." Marcus texted me twice in 1 week for the first time in months. The first message said, "Hope country life is treating you well." The second said, "Need to talk soon. Family level important." When people who dismiss you suddenly use the word family like a legal instrument, brace yourself. By early September, Nora called again, crying this time. She told me Sophia's firm was under internal scrutiny, that Marcus had over-leveraged client exposure while privately mocking the very company he was betting against, and that our parents had tied far too much of their security to his confidence. Then she said the sentence that turned all my unease into certainty. They think you can save them because they think the farm is your biggest asset. I looked out over our land, the late light lying gold across the rows, and felt the future arrive before anyone knocked on my door. "They're going to ask me to sell it," I said. Nora whispered, "They're not going to ask, Olivia. They're going to tell." I hung up and stood there for a long time, listening to the cicadas. Ryan came up behind me, set a hand on my shoulder, and asked, "How bad is it?" I told him. He didn't look shocked. He looked ready. That frightened me more than if panicked. "You knew something like this was coming," I said. He met my eyes with a calm that felt almost unfair. "I knew your brother would eventually mistake arrogance for strategy." "And my parents?" "I knew they would eventually discover the cost of mistaking appearances for truth." I should have demanded answers right then. I should have pushed until every locked door opened. But he kissed my forehead and said, "Let them come first." So I did the most dangerous thing a wounded person can do when they still want one last chance to be wrong. I waited. They summoned us to my parents' house the following Saturday, as if they were still the court and I was still a child waiting for a verdict. The sky over the North Shore was low and gray when Ryan and I pulled into the circular driveway. My mother opened the door before I knocked, which told me two things immediately. She had been watching for us, and she was desperate enough to drop performance before the first line. The living room was arranged like an intervention. My father sat upright on the sofa with a leather folder on his lap. Marcus stood by the fireplace, jaw tight, expensive haircut slightly overgrown in a way that signaled stress to people who normally outsourced every inconvenience. Sophia sat beside him in cream cashmere, her posture still elegant but brittle. Nora was there too, off to the side in a dining chair, looking like someone who had shown up to identify a body. No one offered coffee. No one asked about the drive. My father got straight to it. "There's been a serious financial event," he said, in the same voice he used when discussing weather damage or tax law. "Marcus and Sophia have experienced market-related losses. Our retirement position has also been severely affected. We need a family solution." I laughed once because hearing ruin described like a paperwork delay was almost insulting in its commitment to denial. "A family solution," I repeated. Marcus flinched. Sophia's lips pressed together. My mother clasped her hands so tightly the knuckles went white. "Olivia," she said softly, "we need you to be practical." There it was. Not apology, not truth, utility. My father opened the folder and slid papers across the coffee table. "We had your land appraised." For a second, I genuinely thought I had misheard him. "You did what?" Marcus stepped in before my father could repeat himself. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. The market value on the farm gives us enough room to settle the immediate exposure, protect Mom and Dad from losing the house, and buy time to unwind the rest. You and Ryan can start again somewhere smaller. Maybe lease, maybe take a buyout and relocate." I stared at him. "You're talking about our home." I'm talking about dirt, he snapped, the panic finally punching through the polish. I'm talking about acreage. I'm talking about fixing this before every client I've ever had sues me into the ground. Sophia's eyes filled on cue, but the tears didn't move me. She had used softness as a weapon too many times. Olivia, she whispered, I know we haven't always understood your choices, but this is bigger than old feelings. There are legal implications. There are reputational implications. There are families affected. I almost admired the audacity. She said families affected as if she had not laughed at mine from the first day she met us. My mother reached for me and missed because I stepped back. Sweetheart, please. This is what family does. We rally. We sacrifice. Something inside me that had been bending for years finally stiffened. Where was that sermon when Marcus mocked my marriage at my own wedding? I asked quietly. No one answered. Where was family when Sophia called my life simple like it was a diagnosis? Where was sacrifice when every holiday became an elegant little trial about my worth? My father's face hardened. That is not relevant. It's the only thing that is relevant. Marcus ran a hand through his hair and paced once. God, you still make everything emotional. This is exactly why you could never function in real money. You think your little produce stands and school tours count as serious life? Ryan plays farmer. Sophia built a real career. I built a real career. And now a market event hit, which can happen to anyone. Ryan, who had said almost nothing, finally spoke. A market event? Marcus turned toward him with open contempt. Stay out of this. You don't understand the scale. Ryan's expression didn't change. Then explain the scale. Sophia rose, voice trembling now for real. There were leveraged positions, negative sentiment research, a short thesis that didn't unfold the way it should have. Compliance flagged timing issues. Internal counsel is reviewing communication trails. Happy? Nora shut her eyes. My father cut in fast as if jargon itself could still protect them. The point is that if the farm is sold, the immediate crisis can be contained. I looked at my mother. And what exactly am I supposed to do after that? She had the grace to look away. Marcus answered for her. Rebuild. People do it every day. I felt suddenly calm, frighteningly calm. The kind of calm that only comes when pain burns out and leaves clarity behind. You want me to erase my life because you bet wrong. Marcus slammed his palm against the mantel. I bet on intelligence. I bet against hype. I bet against some overvalued agritech fantasy built on Midwest sentimentality. Ryan's eyes met mine for the briefest second. There it was again. That unreadable steadiness. Not surprise. Confirmation. My heart kicked once. Hard. Olivia, he said quietly. Let them finish. So I did. My mother invoked childhood, family legacy, and all the money they had spent raising me right. My father said sacrifice was owed. Sophia brought up her daughter Lily and asked whether I could really watch a child lose her future over a stubborn attachment to land. Marcus, in full collapse now, said the ugliest thing last. He looked me dead in the eye and said, You owe this family because without us, you never would have had the chance to make your little rebellion in the first place. That sentence should have crushed me. Instead, it clarified everything. I stood up. We're leaving. My father's voice followed us toward the door. Think carefully. If you refuse, don't expect this family to forgive what comes next. I turned back, hand on the brass handle, and asked the only question that mattered. After years of taking my dignity in installments, what exactly do you think I still owe you? No one answered. Not Marcus, not my parents, not Sophia. Only Nora cried. Ryan drove in silence until we crossed out of the suburbs and back toward open land. The farther we got from their house, the more I felt like I had been breathing smoke for years and had only just stepped outside. I thought we were going home to argue. I thought I was going to demand why Ryan had looked unsurprised when Marcus raged about agtech. Instead, when we reached the farm, Ryan led me past the porch, past the kitchen, and straight to the machine shed. He unlocked a side office I had entered 100 times without really seeing, and this time he opened a flat file cabinet built into the wall. Sit down, he said. The tone in his voice made me obey before my anger caught up. He laid patent filings, licensing agreements, federal correspondence, cap tables, and property deeds across the table in neat rows. Then he put one final document in front of me. The top line read, Stone Acre Systems, Inc. I looked up slowly. Ryan, I said, and my own voice sounded far away. What exactly have you been doing in my barn? He didn't answer all at once. That would have been easier, and nothing about that night was easy. He snorts, gave me the truth in layers, the way people unwrap explosives when they love the room too much to ignite it carelessly. Stone Acre Systems, he told me, was an agricultural technology company he had incorporated 5 years earlier. The irrigation controls he built, the soil moisture mapping software, the adaptive drought response systems, the seedbed analytics we tested every season in our fields. None of it had ever been hobby work. The farm had been a living research site from the start. He had patents licensed in 12 states, university partnerships in 3, private contracts with growers across the Midwest, and a pending federal grant large enough to change the scale of everything. I stared at the numbers until they blurred. I had known Ryan was brilliant. I had not known he was quietly becoming powerful. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, and it came out sharper than I intended, because beneath shock was something uglier, hurt. I told you pieces, he said, not the truth. He accepted that without defense. No, not all of it. I pushed back from the table and stood. Do you know what it felt like sitting through those dinners, those holidays, those little humiliations? They kept cutting us apart, and you let me think we had to just be noble about it. You let me stand there feeling small while you were sitting on— I gestured helplessly at the room, the paper, the years I had lived beside without seeing this. Ryan leaned both hands on the table. His face wasn't closed. It was tired. I never wanted you to feel small. But I did. He nodded once. I know. And I'm sorry. That apology hurt more than an argument would have, because it was real, and because I could tell he had carried this guilt privately for a long time. I turned away, trying to sort betrayal from protection, love from strategy. So what was the plan? I asked. To let my family expose themselves until you thought the lesson was complete? Not a lesson, a record. I looked back. He slid another folder toward me. Inside were printed emails, screenshots, analyst notes, and legal summaries. My stomach dropped as I read. Marcus and Sophia had not merely mocked Stone Acre in private. Through Sophia's professional network and Marcus's client channels, they had helped circulate dismissive commentary about the company's viability while building short exposure against it. They hadn't visited the farm. They hadn't examined the licensing portfolio. They hadn't reviewed the patents in depth. They had seen the words rural, agriculture, founder-operated, and Midwest and decided contempt was due diligence. They bet against you, I said. They bet against the company, Ryan corrected quietly. And because they thought the company was a joke? Yes, they bet against me. My anger shifted shape. It didn't disappear, but it found a new target. And Mom and Dad? Marcus placed some of their retirement capital through vehicles tied to the same thesis. He also tied other clients to it. When Stone Acre closed the commercial licensing round in June and the federal partnership news began to circulate privately, the short position became dangerous. When the next earnings cycle hit, it became fatal. I sank back into the chair. Everything suddenly made sense. The land questions, the desperate tone, the appraisals, the urgency. They weren't asking me to sell a farm. They were asking me to destroy the very asset whose success had exposed their arrogance. There is a special kind of human madness in that. Why did they think I owned the land? I asked. Ryan gave a small, humorless smile. Because they never asked. They assumed. The original acreage from my grandmother is held through the conservation side of the Stone Family Trust. The expansion parcels, including the western field and the lab infrastructure, are owned by Stone Acre Systems. You are my wife, my partner, and a shareholder. But the land they want you to sell, it isn't yours to sell. It never was. I laughed then, once disbelieving and sharp. They built this whole rescue fantasy on an assumption? On class arrogance, he said. Same thing in more expensive clothing. I should have felt triumphant right away. But first I felt the grief of wasted years. I thought about my wedding. My mother's eyes on my dress like she was mourning. Marcus raising a glass to humiliation. Sophia smiling like cruelty with sophistication. My father asking if I missed real work. All those moments had sat under my skin like splinters. And now, in a single night, I realized they had all been delivered by people too lazy to understand the life they were judging. I walked to the window. Outside, the fields lay dark and quiet under the moon, more solid than anything in my parents' world had ever been. I hate that I let them make me doubt myself, I said. Ryan came up behind me, not touching me at first. They trained you to confuse contempt with truth. I closed my eyes. And what did you train me to do? He was silent for a beat. I hoped you'd trust what we were building even before you knew the size of it. I turned and looked at him fully. You don't get to make that choice for me again. I know. No more strategic silence. No more deciding what truth I can carry. No more, he said. And I believed him. That was the problem with loving honest people. When they fail you, even their failure feels credible. My phone buzzed then. It was Nora. A single text. They're coming tomorrow. Dad says they'll push until you sign. Sophia is talking about family duty. Marcus is drinking. I showed Ryan. He read it, then reached for a final document I hadn't yet seen. It was a notice from counsel. I asked Leonard Weiss to come by tomorrow. He said, he's our attorney, corporate, regulatory, and very hard to intimidate. I stared at the page, then at him. You were ready for this. I was ready for the day your family confused our kindness with weakness one time too many. And tomorrow? He gathered the documents into one precise stack. Tomorrow they learn that contempt is expensive. I should tell you I slept terribly, but I didn't sleep at all. I lay awake beside the man I loved, listening to the house settle around us, replaying years of family history with new meaning. Every insult had contained an assumption. Every assumption had built toward tomorrow. Around dawn, I rolled over and asked the question that had been waiting in the dark with me all night. Ryan, after they hear the truth, after they understand what they did, what do you think they'll do? He looked at the ceiling and answered in a voice so calm it chilled me. The same thing they've always done, Olivia. Beg for mercy they never offered. They came to our farmhouse the next afternoon with paperwork already prepared as if my life was just another asset they could liquidate. My father put the appraisal on the table and said they needed my answer immediately. Marcus looked furious. My mother was already crying, and Sophia still carried herself like she could talk her way out of disaster. I told them they already had my answer, but Ryan stopped me with one calm glance and said he wanted something clarified first. Then our attorney arrived. That was when everything changed. In front of all of them, Ryan and Leonard laid out the truth piece by piece. The land they wanted me to sell was not mine to sell, and it never had been. The original acreage was protected under the Stone Family Trust, and the research parcels belonged to Stone Acre Systems. Marcus went pale the second he heard that name. Sophia froze. They both knew exactly what it meant. Ryan then showed them the patents, the company records, the federal partnerships, and the financial statements. The worthless dirt they had mocked for years was actually the center of a fast-growing agricultural technology company. The same company Marcus and Sophia had dismissed, underestimated, and financially bet against. Leonard backed it up with trading records and communication trails. Their failed strategy had cost over $2 million and dragged multiple families, including my parents, into the collapse. Then Marcus got the phone call. He listened for less than a minute before his face emptied completely. When he hung up, he said he had been terminated. A moment later, Sophia checked her own phone and whispered that her access had been frozen pending internal review. My mother started sobbing. My father just stared at the documents like they had rewritten reality in front of him. That was when I finally said everything I had carried for years. I told Marcus he had mocked my husband because he thought a man who worked the land had to be beneath him. I told Sophia she had treated my life like proof of smallness simply because it didn't look like hers. And I told my parents that every time they joined in or stayed silent, they taught me exactly how conditional their love was. My mother begged me not to leave them with nothing. Ryan answered before I could. You left us with nothing first. We're just refusing to sacrifice our future to clean up your arrogance. When Marcus asked how I could turn my back on family, I looked him in the eye and asked, after everything you took from me, what exactly do you think I still owe you? No one answered. Only Nora, crying near the door, finally said, Nothing. She owes you nothing. A few minutes later, they walked out of my house in total silence. The fallout came fast. Marcus lost his job, clients turned against him, and his name became toxic in the same financial circles he used to brag about. Sophia's firm cut ties with her, and by the end of the year, she was dealing with investigations, legal pressure, and the collapse of her marriage. My parents were forced to sell their house and move into a much smaller condo, though my mother still tried to call it a lifestyle change whenever anyone asked. Nora was the only one I let back into my life. She apologized without excuses, admitted that staying neutral had still been a betrayal, and slowly proved she meant it. Trust didn't return all at once, but it returned honestly. Ryan and I had our own hard conversations too. I told him no more protective silence, no more deciding what truth I was allowed to carry. He agreed. After that, we moved forward differently. More honest, more equal, stronger than before. Stoneacre kept growing. The federal partnership closed, the research expanded, and more people started taking Ryan's work seriously. The life my family had mocked kept becoming larger, steadier, and more meaningful without any of their approval. That, in the end, was the real answer to all of them. I did not save my family from the consequences of their arrogance. I saved myself from spending the rest of my life shrinking for people who never respected me. And once I finally did that, I understood something clearly. Blood is not the strongest bond in the world. Respect is. Without that, family is just a word people use when they want access to what you built. Thank you for watching and supporting our stories. This is a fictional narrative created only for entertainment, educational reflection, and dramatic storytelling. We hope it reminds you that betrayal can be painful, but it can also become the moment you finally see the truth clearly. Stop accepting excuses and begin building a life that no longer depends on anyone's approval.